We're sitting there and they're like, there's no bass player. They made some calls and they're like, realized there's no bass player coming. So I was like, I'll play bass. And then we get to like the third song where there's an acoustic bass and the conductor goes, can you play the upright? And I'm like, I can't play the upright.
So you just play it on the fret?
Today's episode is sponsored by Gator Cases. Guitarists, like any other musician, value the advantages of proper protection for their gear. Guitars, amps, effects, and accessories all need safe transport and storage. Luckily, Gator's got you covered.
Isn't there a story that you went to Lion King one night before you took over the chair?
Yeah.
You showed up to play guitar, and they went, okay, but the bass player is not here. Can you sub bass? Is that what happened? You went, oh, crap.
Well, yeah, I mean, there was
Do I even know the bass part?
There was a schedule change. And we have, first of all, world-class bass player Tom Barney, who's, played with Steely Dan, Michael Jackson, on and on. He's got like this resume. He's an incredible bass player. But there was some sort of miscommunication, and I'm a sub. I had been playing there like maybe a year or two or something like that. And, we're sitting there and they're like, there's no bass player. And they made some calls. Once it's like 10 of or something, they made some calls and they're like, realized there's no bass player coming. So I was like, I'll play bass. What the hell? Let me try. Because I know this show starts with like Circle of Life and it's like bass, bum, bum, bum. And the guitar stuff is not as critical as Peter knows until maybe like 20 minutes into it or so or whatever. And so I said, all right, let me play bass. And so first of all, the crew guys had to like get out some big like clamp and like chop off the lock off his locker.
Is that really what they did?
Yeah, they give me the bass. Now it's like 5 of, and they give me the bass, and he's got like a half a dozen of these carved-in custom basses, and that they gave him, and I can't get any sound out of it, and finally I'm like, turning it turns out you have to have all the knobs up all the way to get sound for, I don't know why. And then the next thing is it's a 5-string bass, which, I play a little bit of bass, 4-string bass, so I'm like,
confusing.
Okay, so I'll just like ignore the low string. And being a guy that I actually play a lot of different instruments with different tunings and stuff, and I sort of have this thing where even if you don't have to be a virtuoso, you just have to know when you're playing on a certain note, have a little graphic in your head of like where the other notes are relative to that note. So I think, I got this, and I started playing. And it was all right for a while. Tommy Igoe was the drummer. I had a, little clam here and there, it was fine. And then we get to like the third song where there's an acoustic bass and the conductor goes, can you play the upright? And I'm like, I can't play the upright.
So you just play it on the fret?
Meanwhile, no, I was actually jumping back and forth to the guitar part and the bass. And then the keyboard player was playing some bass lines and stuff. And then we're getting into like later in the song, in the show, and there's this one song, it's called Morning Report, it's not in there anymore, but it has this really complicated bass line. It's like, and I was like, I am not going to be able to play this. I've never even looked at it. And then, but the thing is, it's sort of like a country-ish vibe, the song was. So I went and grabbed my guitar chart, and I'm playing, dun, 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 like a rootin' fifth. And the drummer's like laughing his ass off. I can see him like right in front of me. And then finally we're getting up to like, this song, Chow Down, where it's like heavy rock guitar.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, what am I going to do now? And then so finally, like a sub bass player comes running in and sits down
and takes it.
Yeah, and grabs the bass. But I was just like, thank God.
Oh my God.
But clams here and there and stuff because I don't really play it 5-string over the bass.
Wait, Ben, so you just said, so you're right now, you're subbing shows or whatever. So when you go in to sub a new show, you get the book. Do you get a conductor cam?
Yeah, you get typically these
sometimes.
days. You usually, in my experience, you usually get like a Dropbox link with the book, the conductor video, maybe audio recording. Some people cut them up into songs, so you've like an album of songs. A cast recording it doesn't help you really.
Yeah,
you can listen to it, but it's not going to help you.
You won't hear any guitar on.
You won't hear any guitar in the mix.
That's true. And the arrangements are always different, or the cuts are different.
Yeah, it's all different, and you get all that, and maybe I know I looked at Peter's, but he had copious notes and additional videos of how to play certain things, which is super helpful and great. Like some things are like a weird thing, like in Spider-Man, I had a guitar tuned to what did I have it tuned to? Nashville tuning, but it was capoed up or something.
Like
some high strung, and it was capoed up or something. But then when you read that's what it was. When you read the transcription of what it is, it looks impossible to play.
Right,
but then when you actually just, okay, listen, I'll make a little video. These are the chords. This is the strumming pattern. It equals this on the music. Just learn it and play it. So that kind of stuff can help. So you look at all that stuff. You go and watch the show. Usually you want to like get some familiarity with it first, and then come in and sit in the pit and watch the person play it. Hopefully you get it's a pit where you can actually sit kind of next to or behind or whatever, and you can not only watch them play, but also watch the choreography and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then zero in. I always ask, where do people trip up?
Where are the money
what are the
spots?
sub killers?
Yeah, right, yeah.
What are the money spots or the whatever you want to call it, the white knuckle moments? And it could be the easiest thing. Like you could look at something, like, oh, it's got this cool part, and I learned it and I play it really great, whatever. But then when you go to do the show, that's not the thing that's going to trip you up.
Yeah.
It literally could be at this one moment in this bar, and there's a transition to this, and you've got to follow the conductor or whatever. It's always the things that are exposed when only you are playing. Or the things where you start the song and again exposed, or the things where there's no click and you're just following the conductor and it's just like you, the conductor, and a singer or something. Those usually wind up being more important than some guitar solo.
And they even say like, it's only on Broadway where playing something like a Mel Bay level melody line could be really hard,
Yeah, because you clam one note and it just sounds like hilariously wrong. It's just everyone knows what it should be, and you on one fret off or whatever, and the kinds of things on gigs, if you play in bands and you've played in clubs and you've gone on tour, whatever, the kind of stuff that would just disappear the second that it happened, but not in a Broadway pit. Those are the eye-opening moments.
I mean, I would even add a little, I'm just like hyper detailed when I would go in and watch. One thing that I would always do is record every time I go in.
Oh, really?
So if you watch it 4 times or
It's a
even
little
5
different
times,
every time.
I have recording every time. So because one thing that happens is people get hung up on like the tempos within a certain specific recording they have, and then they play that when they come in, but that might not be at all what happens while they're playing, relative to the recording. So if you record like 4 times, or every time you come in, which could be even 4 or 5 times depending on the difficulty of the show. Right. You get that, you get the tempo changes, but also you hear where the guitar player is like, where he's playing the ink, or where he might like ad lib a lot of spots, but in which spots does he really ad lib, and which spots does he play sort of the same thing every time, even though it's an ad libby type spot, he might play the same thing every time. So you might want to do that, and then so that's one little detail.